The most painful truth about love is this: sometimes the person who feels the deepest connection is the very one who disappears. What if the distance is not rejection? What if the silence, the withdrawal, and the absence are symptoms of a battle taking place deep within the unconscious mind? Today, we will explore why someone who loves profoundly may choose to stay away, and what Carl Jung believed is really happening beneath the surface. Have you ever wondered why certain people move closer when they care, while others seem to vanish the moment emotions become real? It appears irrational. If love is present, why create distance? Yet Jung understood something most people never realize. Human beings are not driven only by conscious desires. They are guided by hidden fears, unresolved wounds, forgotten memories, and forces operating beneath awareness. Sometimes the heart moves toward connection while the unconscious moves toward escape. If this topic resonates with you, stay until the end, because the final reason may completely change how you interpret someone's absence. If this insight is helping you see human behavior from a deeper psychological perspective, take a moment to subscribe, leave a comment, and share which idea resonates most with you. Understanding the unconscious can transform the way we interpret relationships, distance, and emotional connection. One of the most misunderstood realities of human relationships is that deep love does not always lead to immediate closeness. People often assume that when feelings are genuine, a person will naturally move toward the one they love. Yet human psychology is far more complex. Carl Jung believed that much of human behavior is influenced by unconscious forces that operate beneath awareness. When someone experiences a connection that touches the deepest parts of the psyche, it can awaken emotions and fears that are difficult to understand or control. A powerful emotional bond often acts like a mirror. It reflects not only the qualities a person admires, but also the hidden parts of themselves they have spent years avoiding. This can include insecurities, self-doubt, fears of rejection, and painful memories from earlier experiences. The stronger the connection, the more intense this reflection becomes. Instead of feeling only excitement and happiness, a person may suddenly become aware of vulnerabilities they never wanted to face. What appears to be a beautiful relationship on the surface can trigger a profound internal struggle. The unconscious mind is designed to protect psychological stability. Whenever a situation threatens a person's sense of safety or control, defense mechanisms may activate automatically. Deep love often requires openness, trust, and emotional exposure. For someone carrying unresolved emotional wounds, these requirements can feel dangerous. They may fear being abandoned, misunderstood, or hurt. Even if these fears are not based on the present situation, the unconscious reacts as though old dangers are returning. This creates a painful contradiction. A person may genuinely desire connection while simultaneously feeling compelled to retreat. They may think constantly about the relationship, value it deeply, and yet create distance. Their withdrawal is not always a sign that the feelings are weak. In some cases, it is a sign that the emotions are so significant that they have disrupted the person's inner balance. Jung observed that meaningful relationships often become catalysts for psychological growth. They force individuals to confront aspects of themselves that have remained hidden for years. Such encounters can feel overwhelming because they challenge established beliefs, emotional defenses, and familiar patterns of behavior. Rather than moving forward confidently, some people step back to regain a sense of control over their internal world. Distance, therefore, can sometimes represent an unfinished psychological process. The individual is not necessarily escaping the connection itself, but the transformation that the connection demands. Love has the power to reveal both the brightest and darkest corners of the psyche, and not everyone feels prepared to face what they discover when those hidden depths come into the light. One of the deepest reasons a person may stay away despite loving intensely lies in the conflict between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. Carl Jung believed that human beings are rarely as self-aware as they imagine. While the conscious mind may desire intimacy, commitment, and emotional closeness, the unconscious often carries fears and unresolved experiences that push in the opposite direction. This inner division can create behavior that seems contradictory, confusing, and even self-destructive. When a relationship begins to matter deeply, it enters territory far beyond ordinary attraction. Casual connections rarely disturb the inner world because they do not require profound emotional investment. A meaningful bond, however, reaches beneath the surface and touches the most vulnerable parts of the personality. It awakens hopes, dreams, fears, and emotional needs that may have remained dormant for years. Suddenly, the relationship is no longer just about another person. It becomes connected to one's identity, sense of worth, and emotional security. This is where unconscious fear begins to emerge. Many people carry hidden emotional wounds from childhood, past relationships, betrayals, or periods of rejection. Even when these experiences are forgotten consciously, they continue to influence behavior from beneath awareness. When genuine love appears, the unconscious interprets emotional closeness as a risk. The greater the potential happiness, the greater the potential pain. As a result, a person may begin withdrawing not because they lack feelings, but because the relationship has become emotionally significant enough to activate old fears. Jung often emphasized that what remains unconscious tends to control us. A person may genuinely believe they want love while unconsciously resisting it. They may feel overwhelmed by emotions they cannot explain. One day, they seek connection, and the next, they create distance. Their actions appear inconsistent because they are being pulled by opposing psychological forces. Part of them longs for intimacy, while another part desperately tries to avoid vulnerability. The situation becomes even more complicated when love challenges a person's existing self-image. Deep emotional connection often exposes weaknesses and insecurities that were previously hidden. Someone who appeared confident may suddenly feel inadequate. Someone who valued independence may discover an unexpected fear of dependence. These revelations can be deeply unsettling. Rather than confronting these uncomfortable truths, some individuals retreat from the relationship that brought them into awareness. What appears from the outside as avoidance or indifference may actually be an internal struggle for psychological stability. The person is attempting to protect themselves from emotions they do not fully understand. They are not necessarily running from the connection itself, but from the intense transformation it has begun within them. A transformation that demands courage, self-awareness, and a willingness to face the unknown regions of the soul. Carl Jung believed that every human being carries a shadow, a hidden dimension of the personality containing qualities, emotions, and experiences that have been rejected, ignored, or pushed out of conscious awareness. The shadow is not necessarily evil or negative. It often contains fears, insecurities, unmet needs, buried grief, and forgotten aspects of the self. Most people spend years building an identity that allows them to function comfortably in the world. But this identity represents only a small portion of who they truly are. When deep love enters a person's life, it has a remarkable ability to illuminate the shadow and bring hidden material to the surface. A profound emotional connection does more than create feelings of affection. It exposes the inner landscape of the psyche. Suddenly, emotions that were dormant begin to awaken. A person who believed they had moved beyond old pain may find themselves reliving fears they thought were long forgotten. Memories associated with rejection, abandonment, disappointment, or betrayal can resurface with surprising intensity. The relationship itself may not be causing these feelings, but it becomes the catalyst that reveals them. This process can be deeply unsettling because the shadow contains elements of ourselves that we often prefer not to acknowledge. A person may discover how much validation they secretly crave. They may become aware of fears of inadequacy that contradict the confident image they present to others. They may realize that beneath their independence lies a powerful desire for connection and acceptance. Such discoveries challenge the carefully constructed identity that has provided a sense of security for years. The stronger the emotional bond, the brighter the light that shines on these hidden aspects of the psyche. Love has a way of reaching places that ordinary experiences cannot access. It bypasses intellectual defenses and touches the emotional core of the individual. For this reason, genuine intimacy often feels both attractive and frightening at the same time. The connection promises fulfillment, but it also demands self-confrontation. Many people are not prepared for this encounter with their shadow. Instead of recognizing the internal nature of their discomfort, they associate the unease with the relationship itself. They begin to believe that distance will solve the problem. By stepping away, they hope to escape the anxiety, confusion, and emotional intensity they are experiencing. Yet the shadow does not disappear simply because physical distance is created. The underlying conflict remains unresolved. Jung understood that psychological growth requires facing the shadow rather than avoiding it. However, this process demands courage and self-awareness. When someone withdraws despite strong feelings, they may be struggling with aspects of themselves that have suddenly become visible. The relationship has opened a door to deeper self-knowledge, but crossing that threshold requires confronting truths that can no longer remain hidden in the darkness of the unconscious mind. Another reason someone who loves deeply may choose to stay away is that genuine love often threatens the structure of the ego. Carl Jung described the ego as the center of conscious identity, the part of the psyche that creates a sense of who we are and how we fit into the world. The ego seeks stability, predictability, and control. It prefers situations that can be understood and managed. Deep emotional connection, however, introduces uncertainty into life, and uncertainty is something the ego naturally resists. When a person becomes emotionally attached, they are no longer completely self-contained. Their happiness, hopes, and fears become connected to another human being. This creates a level of vulnerability that many people find difficult to tolerate. Love requires trust, without guarantees. It asks individuals to open parts of themselves that have been carefully protected. For the ego, this can feel like a loss of control. The possibility of rejection, disappointment, or emotional pain becomes impossible to ignore. As feelings deepen, the ego often begins to perceive emotional intimacy as a threat. The person may start questioning whether they are worthy of love, whether the connection will last, or whether they will eventually be hurt. These doubts do not necessarily arise because something is wrong with the relationship. They emerge because the ego recognizes that it can no longer fully control the outcome. A situation that once felt exciting may suddenly feel frightening. This fear frequently operates beneath conscious awareness. A person may not understand why they are becoming distant or why they feel uncomfortable despite caring deeply. They only recognize an increasing sense of emotional pressure. The closer they become to another person, the more exposed they feel. Instead of confronting this vulnerability directly, they may create space as a way of reducing anxiety. Distance provides a temporary illusion of safety. It allows the ego to regain a sense of independence and emotional control. Jung observed that human beings often avoid experiences that threaten their established sense of self. Deep love has the power to transform identity because it reveals needs, desires, and emotional capacities that may have remained hidden. Someone who has always viewed themselves as independent may discover an unexpected longing for closeness. Someone who prides themselves on emotional strength may encounter fears they never knew existed. These discoveries can be unsettling because they challenge familiar beliefs about who they are. The conflict becomes particularly intense when the individual is not ready for change. Part of them wants the connection, while another part fears the transformation that accompanies it. The resulting tension creates confusion, hesitation, and withdrawal. What appears from the outside as avoidance may actually be an attempt to preserve psychological balance. The person is struggling with the realization that real love requires surrendering certain illusions of control and stepping into a realm where certainty can never be fully guaranteed. Carl Jung believed that some of the most powerful experiences in life serve as catalysts for psychological transformation. Deep love is one of those experiences. It does not simply bring two people together. It often initiates a profound internal journey that forces an individual to confront parts of themselves that have remained undeveloped or ignored. When someone loves deeply yet stays away, it may be because they have entered a period of inner transformation that feels too overwhelming to navigate while maintaining close emotional involvement. Many people move through life relying on familiar habits, beliefs, and emotional patterns. These patterns create a sense of stability and identity. However, A meaningful connection can disrupt this stability. Suddenly, the person begins questioning assumptions they have carried for years. They may become aware of emotional needs they previously denied. They may recognize fears, insecurities, or unresolved conflicts that have quietly influenced their behavior. What once seemed certain about themselves no longer feels secure. Jung referred to the process of becoming psychologically whole as individuation. This journey involves integrating hidden aspects of the personality and developing a more authentic relationship with oneself. Individuation is not comfortable because it requires confronting truths that the ego would rather avoid. A deep emotional bond often acts as the trigger for this process. Through the relationship, an individual sees reflections of both their strengths and weaknesses. The connection exposes areas of growth that can no longer remain hidden. For some people, this awakening creates a period of emotional confusion. They begin to realize that they are not the person they thought they were. Their previous coping mechanisms may no longer work. Old defenses begin to weaken. Questions about purpose, identity, and emotional fulfillment rise to the surface. The relationship becomes linked to these internal changes, making it difficult to separate personal growth from romantic feelings. Because transformation is often accompanied by uncertainty, some individuals withdraw in order to focus on their inner struggle. They may feel incapable of giving fully to a relationship while they are trying to understand themselves. The distance is not necessarily an indication that the connection lacks value. In many cases, it is precisely because the connection matters so much that it has triggered such significant psychological movement. The challenge is that this process is rarely visible to others. From the outside, the withdrawal can appear confusing or even contradictory. Yet internally, the person may be confronting fears, examining old wounds, and attempting to build a stronger foundation for their sense of self. They are standing between who they have been and who they are becoming. Jung understood that genuine transformation requires time and reflection. It cannot be rushed or forced. When deep love coincides with a period of individuation, the individual may feel compelled to step back, not because the bond is unimportant, but because the encounter has awakened a journey into the depths of the psyche that demands their full attention and energy. One of Carl Jung's most significant insights was that people are often drawn to others not only because of who those individuals are, but because they unconsciously project parts of themselves onto them. This process, known as projection, plays a powerful role in deep emotional connections. When someone loves profoundly yet remains distant, it may be because the relationship has activated unconscious projections that create both fascination and fear. Projection occurs when qualities, desires, emotions, or potentials that exist within the unconscious are perceived in another person. Instead of recognizing these elements as part of themselves, individuals experience them as belonging entirely to the other. In the early stages of a meaningful connection, this can create an intense sense of attraction and significance. The other person appears extraordinary, almost symbolic, carrying qualities that seem capable of completing something missing within the individual. As the relationship deepens, however, the unconscious begins demanding a more mature understanding. The person gradually realizes that the emotional intensity is not solely about the connection itself. It is also about aspects of their own psyche that have been projected outward. This realization can be deeply unsettling because it requires taking responsibility for feelings, needs, and unrealized potentials that were previously attributed to someone else. Jung believed that projections serve an important psychological function. They reveal hidden dimensions of the self and create opportunities for growth, yet they also create tension. The person may feel compelled toward the relationship because it carries immense emotional meaning while simultaneously feeling overwhelmed by what it reveals about their inner world. The connection becomes more than a relationship. It becomes a confrontation with parts of themselves they have not fully understood. This inner conflict often leads to withdrawal. The individual may sense that something significant is happening psychologically, but lack the awareness to explain it. They feel drawn toward closeness while also experiencing discomfort, confusion, or anxiety. Instead of examining the unconscious material that has surfaced, they may create physical or emotional distance. Withdrawal becomes a way of reducing the intensity of emotions that feel difficult to manage. The situation becomes even more complicated when the connection challenges long-held beliefs about identity. A person who considered themselves emotionally self-sufficient may discover a deep need for companionship. Someone who believed they understood themselves completely may encounter unfamiliar desires and vulnerabilities. These discoveries can feel destabilizing because they force a reassessment of the self-image that has guided their life. From a Jungian perspective, the distance is not always about escaping another person. It is often about avoiding the psychological work that the relationship has initiated. The individual stands face to face with aspects of their own psyche that have emerged through the connection. Until they begin to understand and integrate these unconscious elements, the emotional intensity may feel too powerful to approach directly, creating a pattern in which profound affection coexists with hesitation, retreat, and silence. Carl Jung believed that human beings possess a natural tendency to seek wholeness, yet this journey toward psychological completeness often involves confronting deep fears. One of the greatest fears awakened by profound love is the fear of vulnerability. When someone loves deeply but chooses to stay away, the underlying reason may not be a lack of feeling, but an inability to cope with the emotional exposure that genuine intimacy demands. Vulnerability requires a person to reveal aspects of themselves that are normally protected from the outside world. It involves sharing fears, insecurities, dreams, disappointments, and emotional needs. For many individuals, these parts of the self have been carefully hidden behind psychological defenses developed over years of experience. These defenses may have formed after betrayal, rejection, criticism, abandonment, or emotional neglect. Although they serve a protective purpose, they also create barriers that prevent complete emotional openness. When a connection remains superficial, these defenses are rarely challenged. The individual can maintain control over what they reveal and how deeply they become involved. However, a meaningful emotional bond changes this dynamic. As trust grows and feelings deepen, the possibility of being truly seen by another person becomes real. While this can be profoundly rewarding, it can also feel threatening to someone whose past experiences taught them that openness leads to pain. The unconscious mind often reacts to vulnerability as if it were a danger rather than an opportunity. Even when there is no actual threat present, old emotional memories can influence current behavior. The person may begin feeling anxious without understanding why. They may experience a desire to withdraw at the exact moment the relationship becomes more significant. This reaction is not always a conscious decision. It is often an automatic attempt to avoid emotional risk. Jung emphasized that what remains unresolved within the psyche continues to influence present experiences. A person who has not fully processed earlier emotional wounds may find that deep love reactivates those dormant fears. The prospect of losing someone important becomes frightening. The possibility of rejection feels more painful because the emotional investment is greater. Rather than risking future heartbreak, the individual may choose distance as a form of self-protection. This behavior often appears contradictory from the outside. The person may care deeply, think constantly about the connection, and genuinely desire closeness. Yet every step toward intimacy increases feelings of vulnerability. The stronger the attachment becomes, the greater the fear of emotional exposure. As a result, the individual becomes trapped between two opposing desires, the longing for connection and the need for safety. Jung understood that psychological growth requires moving beyond defensive patterns and accepting vulnerability as part of authentic human experience. However, not everyone reaches this understanding at the same pace. For some individuals, the emotional risks associated with deep love feel so overwhelming that retreat seems easier than remaining exposed, creating a painful situation in which affection and avoidance exist side by side within the same heart and mind. Carl Jung often explored the idea that some of the most important events in life are not random, but carry deep psychological meaning. He believed that certain relationships enter our lives as transformative experiences, challenging us to grow beyond the limits of our current identity. When someone who loves deeply chooses to stay away, it can sometimes reflect a struggle with the profound changes that the connection has set into motion. The absence is not always about the relationship itself. It may be about the individual's difficulty accepting the person they are becoming because of it. A meaningful emotional connection has the power to disrupt established patterns of thinking and behaving. Before such a connection appears, a person may feel relatively comfortable with their understanding of themselves. They know their habits, beliefs, strengths, and weaknesses. Their life follows familiar psychological structures. Then a relationship emerges that touches the deepest layers of the psyche, and suddenly those structures begin to shift. Feelings become stronger, priorities change, and hidden emotional needs rise to the surface. This process can be both inspiring and unsettling. The connection reveals possibilities that previously seemed unreachable. It may awaken a desire for greater emotional depth, honesty, commitment, or self-understanding. At the same time, it exposes limitations that have been ignored for years. A person may recognize patterns of fear, emotional avoidance, insecurity, or self-sabotage that were hidden beneath the surface. These discoveries are not always easy to accept because they challenge long-held assumptions about who they are. Jung believed that growth occurs when individuals integrate these newly discovered aspects of themselves into a more complete personality. However, integration requires effort, courage, and self-reflection. It involves letting go of outdated identities and embracing psychological change. Many people find this transition difficult because it creates uncertainty. The familiar version of themselves begins to fade, while the emerging version is not yet fully formed. During this period of transformation, some individuals instinctively seek distance. They may feel overwhelmed by the emotional significance of the connection and uncertain about how to move forward. The relationship becomes linked to powerful inner changes, making every interaction feel emotionally charged. Rather than engaging directly with these feelings, they withdraw in an attempt to regain stability and clarity. From the outside, this behavior can seem confusing because the emotional bond remains present. The person may still care deeply and feel a strong attachment, yet their actions suggest hesitation or avoidance. Jung would argue that this contradiction reflects the tension between the old self and the emerging self. The individual is standing at a psychological crossroads, confronted by the challenge of transformation. In many cases, the distance reflects an unconscious effort to make sense of an inner evolution that has been triggered by love itself. The connection has become more than a relationship. It has become a doorway into deeper self-discovery, exposing possibilities, fears, and dimensions of the psyche that can no longer remain hidden from awareness.